paper that showed that. Now Suzanne Stapler.
All right, it appearing to be 8:15 in the morning. Let's call the utility committee meeting to order. I guess we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit unusual to have a morning meeting. I thank everybody on the committee for making the time, as well as the administration and Kathy. With that said, Kathy, could we have the roll?
Hicken,
Here.
Walther,
Here.
Lee,
Here.
And without any further ado, Mr. Shrock, I believe the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Hicken. Wanted to start things off with just a quick update on the WRF upgrade. The PTI has been submitted to the EPA for review. We're still on track for our October construction loan award date, which is what we've been shooting for the whole time. We did have a meeting with Hall and Prime, who were doing the design, and we added a couple things like a eye wash station and a shower in the chemical building for phosphorus reduction. Where the pumps are gonna go into the oxidation ditch, it was kind of a difficult spot to get a truck to, so we're gonna level out some areas. Just some minor things, couple operational valving options that the guys wanted at the plants, some simple things like that, but nothing that's gonna set us back any at all. So just wanted to give a quick update on that.
So how about where are we budgetarily with that?
We have, at this point, we are still on track with what was expected. The largest item that we've paid for so far is the PTI review. But we haven't received all the invoices from the budget section, the design section of the budget yet. So still on track for what we were expecting. Construction budget's not looking at any of the changes we've made. Nothing's raising any red flags at this point. It's gonna put us over the 1.4 that we were talking about the whole time.
And can you remind the committee when the construction date for that is kind of scheduled to start?
It will be spring of next year is the, maybe March or April, depending on weather of next year.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Mr.
I guess you have a
You guys
proposal.
can have, if you guys wanna have a seat, yeah.
You have a proposal from Strand in here. Who's bidding this in October? And let's say it goes ahead and gets approved to go out for construction bidding. Who's gonna bid this project out?
That will be Hall. It's all part of the initial resolution for the whole design loan process.
Okay, and then you've got this, and I haven't read it yet, but this if authorized services, what exactly we have?
That's all the next section, that's all related to the I&I. It has nothing to do with.
I&I.
I wanna have a real good discussion
All
about
right, very good.
this.
There we go. No other questions?
So, moving on to the number 5, the I&I Corrective Action Program. We did get our draft permit back from the EPA. We ended up getting it later than they said they sent it to us. The guy who wrote up the draft went on vacation. Somehow that thing did not get sent out to the city. It wasn't until July 11th, 8 days later, that I emailed in and asked for it. I thought it should have been here by now, and they gave it to us. You have a 30-day window to make comments and kind of push back on the requirements that they've put in. The section that's paperclipped together is the 2 pages of the permit that cover the I&I section, and you can see that they wrote in there that the city is required to eliminate I&I water from the collection system, and the construction timeline is at 48 months, which is extremely unreasonable. First off, to eliminate the I&I is unreasonable in itself at any time frame. You're not gonna get rid of all of it. And then the 48 months was a ridiculous time frame, basically, for us to follow. So we did have a meeting Monday the 29th, sat down, and immediately John was receptive to the fact that that was too strict for us. So we were working on the comment period back and forth with them. The comments are due August 5th because they're still using the July 3rd start point that we didn't receive. We did not receive anything July 3rd. So I've asked them in person to extend that comment period, and it was denied. So I sent an email last night, yesterday afternoon, in writing, explaining why. Had several extenuating circumstances I thought should give us an extension. and I'm waiting to hear back from him again. So I'm asking for an extra 2 weeks to get our comments together regarding this I&I issue. The rest of the permit, we have very little issue, but not much has changed from the before, but.
I wanted to let the committee know, I had a conversation with Chris, and in two instances, the first one, John, that he mentions is,
John Owen from the EPA.
From the
Yes,
EPA.
yes, sorry.
and the other one, part of that is, the EPA said that they had sent every council person
Yes.
a copy of this. Of course, I was on vacation, but I was able to at least look at my email, and I saw nothing from the EPA, and I don't imagine any of you
I
did
got
either.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
And I've received other things from Southwest Lincoln. I got one this morning for a development that's going in. I receive public notices all the time. It was just the most important one that suddenly didn't show up.
What's even more surprising to me is that they would send them to the elected officials and not the operator.
It seemed
That
a
to
bit
me-
odd.
That to me is extremely odd. So, with that said,
Yes, so I'm waiting to hear back from him on the extension, one way or the other. So paperclip to that, we went through the RFQ process, which is a new process with me, and BJ has helped me with this quite a bit, which I appreciate, but as we've said before, we advertised the RFQ to come up with an I&I plan. We got 6 submittals for that. We formed a panel with the staff, went over this submittals individually, came together, and all 3 of us had Strand picked as the preferred firm. And this is, what's stapled here, the proposal, is their price point for the work that would be done. Got this last night, and it seems exceptionally high, to be honest. So at this point, I'm not quite sure where we're gonna land on this, but I feel like this is a bit high for what we're asking to get done. So if we can't come to an agreement with them on price, we would have to move on to the next firm selected. The problem with that is if we go, my understanding is if we go to the next firm selected and they come in at a higher price, we cannot go back to Strand.
That's correct.
Which is a little bit of a risk. But the next Strand, I looked at our scoring sheets, it was GPD, it used to be W. Stilson, they came in second for us. So if we can't come to an agreeable price for Strand, I think we'll have to reach out to GPD.
I know you have questions, go ahead, you may cover some of the
Just,
stuff that I was.
just a quick question. Their proposal's based on what EPA sent as far as total elimination, correct?
So their proposal is based off of, so they're gonna change it to reduction, and there's no amount of reduction that's required. And the construction thing that we talk back and forth with, we don't have to do the whole plan in 48 months. All we have to do is start one portion of the plan, and then we can just take small bites at it. Their proposal is covering the restrictions laid out by the EPA in the permit. Not the timeline or the word eliminate, but the II, and III under 1A. Those 3 things are outlined specifically, and those are that's where they developed their scope from, and then their price off of that. So you'd have the complete evaluation of the residences, the evaluation of the sanitary system, which we did tell the EPA, it's kind of silly for us to evaluate the newer subdivisions, that's not where our problem is. So we're just gonna evaluate Old Town. And then the wet weather capacity for the wastewater plant, which we don't have to do until a year after the upgrades are done, because it would be silly to do before the upgrades are done. But that is where they pulled their scope from.
Okay, thanks.
and it's a little confusing to me, Chris. When I'm looking at this, I see a scope of services and then an authorized services. Do I add those 2 together to get
Yes,
their bid?
so the total will come out at 128. For
And as I,
everything.
one moment, Mr. King, and I'll remember that your hand's up.
Thank you.
And as I also recall, we were trying to find, or we found, the money for this portion of the budget through some leftover
Yes.
in the neighborhood of 60.
Yes, so we have in the budget, there was a standby pump for Settlement Lift Station, which is very similar to the standby pump we purchased for the East Side Lift Station. The thought process was we could leave the standby pump at the station, hooked up, ready to go. If the station failed, it would take over. What we found through last year with the East Side Station is that, they don't like being outside, and during the winter, it's almost impossible to keep the pumps from freezing up, the lines, the pumps themselves. We tried everything we could, including putting RV antifreeze into the line, and nothing worked. They froze up every time. So we kind of considered that project to not be a good project to move forward with. That left $60,000 in the sewer capital improvement funds that we thought maybe we could use, for this project, to come up with the I&I plan.
Mr. King?
Yeah, I'll just say, when Chris shared this proposal with me last night, I was really surprised at the amount. And there's a couple comments I have, you know, it's broken down in the scope of services and then the if authorized scope of services. But the way I look at this, like you do, Tim, that's $128,000 that we're talking about, because the if authorized are things we're gonna need anyways. It just seems like a weird way to do it. Also, the scope of services, $10,000 for those items under scope of services number 1, seems like a lot of money to do those items. It really does to me. I don't feel comfortable recommending this contract and this amount to council. As Chris pointed out, we do have some deadlines looming. I'm hoping we can get that extension to this. I have asked Chris to go back to Strand again to see what their final price is, because at this point, if they say it's this, my feeling is we have to move on to number 2 and see what we can get. Granted, we do have a looming deadline from the EPA, but I don't feel like we should make a decision for this amount of money this quickly.
I couldn't agree more on that. Mr. Walter?
Well, two things, on the looming deadline, you know, Chris, I understand you've written to them, you've talked to them, you know, at what point do we get, Mr. Zetz involved in this? I mean, I think Mr. Zetz would be firing off a letter immediately to tell them that they're not within their own, regulations, first of all. Nobody received it, they don't have any proof that anybody received it, do that. Obviously, if they sent it by email, and none of us got it, then they must have, missed everybody's email.
Right.
Maybe they put a dot somewhere that they didn't need to. Whatever the case, but I would think Mr. Zetz needs to get involved immediately to stop that. And then secondly, on this is, I would agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I would throw this in the trash.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, so you did an RFQ, which I understand. How many other companies did you say there were?
We had 6 altogether.
But with those other 6, the Strand is the only one that gave you a price?
No.
No. 'Cause
Just real quick, so we know, so.
I wanna make sure.
The Ohio Revised Code has a process in there for soliciting professional services. And it is an RFQ process. So what we do is we create an advertisement, here are the scope of services we're looking for to create an I&I elimination plan, had other stuff. Companies give us their qualifications, nothing with price at all. That process, then the next step is to form a committee, and that committee was me, Chris, and Alan. We independently looked at these, scored them, came together, shared our scores, who rose to the top, where there's some similarities. Strand was that first one. The next step in the RFQ process then is whoever is your number 1 firm, you go to them and negotiate a price for them. If you cannot agree on a price with your first one, you move on to the second highest scoring one and do the same thing. But you cannot, if they come in higher, you cannot go back to the first one and say we like their price better.
Well, yeah, that leads to my question then, is what, I get that. So we don't, even though they gave a price, we don't know what the other 5.
Correct.
Right, we have to
Prices.
we have to do each one individually, step by step, which makes it impossible to
Soliciting
compare.
the professional
I don't
service.
get why you wouldn't just look at all of them.
You keep-
I get the RFQ and I get that, but it's like, what, I don't know, that doesn't seem to make sense to me in my brain, but I get it.
It is a requirement that's spelled out in the ORC.
Okay, fair enough. They're smarter than I am. I get it.
Well, I'm sorry, Kathy?
One thing on the communications with the EPA, typically, there'll be a letter, and I don't know what happens with what's in the letter, but a letter will come and it'll be addressed mayor and council. That letter goes into the mayor's mailbox because his name appears first. So there could be something that is being missed if that isn't forwarded on to council.
We should,
Just an FYI.
I will
Still, I agree.
scour his office.
The
I
mayor's
will
not here.
say-
He would probably hate to hear this, but we're a strong council government. It should say council and the mayor as far as I'm concerned, but that's just a
that's very,
political.
that's
No, I
another
agree.
good
I
point
will
by
say-
Mr. Zetz.
I will say on the mayor's behalf, there have been times he's received letters from the EPA, not like this, just notifications of different permits that have been, and he always gives them to me.
No, I.
He did not do that at all.
So,
No, that
But I
isn't what I
appreciate
meant,
that,
but,
Kathy.
you know, that might
Could
be
be a
where
mismatch.
something could be missed.
I appreciate that.
thank you, Kathy. So where we are with this, and I just wanna tie it up with the bow real quick, because I'm watching the clock, I know we've got a good agenda here. Is before, when we were under a time crunch, you know, we were attempting to move forward with this as fast as possible. We've asked for, have not been granted yet, a little bit of a leeway on that.
Right.
I would also agree with Andy, the administration might wanna let, at this point, give a little briefing memo to Mr. Zetz and say, hey. So I'm 100% in with that. And we are waiting, so we're not gonna see anything on the next council meeting on
That's
the
correct.
agenda
Correct.
about this.
Correct.
But the longer we wait, the more we run in danger of missing their arbitrary.
Correct. Now, that's just for the
Just
comment
30
period.
comments, yeah.
I understand.
So I can still compile, comments based off of everything that we've already discussed and, come up with and submit them if everything is not granted in Mr. Zetz's, after speaking with him, of course. But we can submit something to them. We just can't move forward with, developing a plan and, selecting our firm until at least the next meeting, not the 5th, but the next one.
Yeah, and I was just gonna ask Chris, you know, in review of this, other than the verbal comments and the discussion you've had with Mr. Owen already, what other comments might you have? I mean, have you started to formulate other comments? Because two things. One, I certainly would like council to submit the comments, rather than just you submitting. Not that that's a problem, but if they're sending letters to council, then council should submit the comments back. It should be a joint letter saying, these are our comments against your findings, essentially.
Right.
And if you have comments already, then we can go ahead and, again, it's a 30-day comment session, that's all it is.
Right, right. I do have some comments, lined up already. I've got to put them together. I've got to fine tune them. I don't know if I could have them by the end of the day for the, packet submittal, but I could definitely have them together and ready to go by Monday.
And you see that as a,
No, I think that certainly adds some, meat to the letter, oomph, there you go, oomph, meat, whatever, that if it comes from, you know, the city council of Tascala.
Yeah.
That's top coming to them, and,
at least the utility committee. I mean, I can see that also, whichever way you guys wanna do it.
and, you know, my feeling on this, and I know it's early still, so it may just be, but there may be beneficial to have some comments in there about we were rushed because of
Mhm.
the timeframes with this. And not that I'm recommending doing this, Chris, but just for my own education, what happens if that deadline comes, we don't get an extension, and that deadline passes?
So from the EPA's perspective, the initial, language is what they would adopt. So where it
Okay.
says eliminate everything in 4
You don't
years
wanna do
is
that.
what
So
they
we just
would adopt.
basically said, comment, we disagree with everything.
Yeah, I mean, it can be fairly brief if it needed
Right,
to be.
we could easily do something, yeah. So I can compile something together, I'll immediately email it off to the utility
Okay.
committee, and I'll have it ready to go Monday, to put on everybody's desk.
On a side note, it seems to me incredibly arbitrary and capricious
To do what?
to fix your wastewater problem in this amount of time, and if a local municipality, again, kudos to the administration, but if some local municipality just put it into a shredder or a round file someplace, and all of a sudden they get stuck with this judgment from the EPA, they're gonna be in trouble. Essentially, they're gonna violate their permit.
Right, right.
And to me, that's after working there, to me, that sounds really.
We've been very
Sure.
transparent with them through the whole process. They've known about the
No, we
RFQ
have a good
advertisement,
relationship with them, I
so
think.
it does seem a bit unreasonable to
Well-
not grant us at least an extension.
And local municipalities always struggle with unfunded mandates that come down.
Sure.
So-
Okay.
Hey, Chris, with that letter, I would say let's get it done by the end of the week and get it out to council before Monday with
Absolutely.
an explanation of what it is,
Okay.
just so Monday night it's not here and leaves questions.
I'll also touch on it a little bit in my committee report, so that'll help to.
Would you like me to send it to the committee a day in advance, just to get comments back from you, and then send it to the rest of council, or
It's
all at
already
once?
Wednesday.
I would say
That's-
so.
Yeah.
I think just craft it and send it, and
We
if
can
they
do
have
that.
questions, then maybe that can drive conversation in an actual council meeting.
Not a problem.
Awesome.
Real quick, Mr. Hicken,
Yes, sir?
I am going to excuse myself, I have another meeting, coming up, but I wanted to be here for this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next, number 6 of the agenda is the creation of the operator 2 position. So this is something I just want to touch base with the utility committee. The way the green page is the proposed flow chart with the operator 2 position inserted. If you remove that operator 2 position, that's the way we are structured now. So we have a field tech 1 and a field tech 2 position. Up until this year, there were no license requirements for any of these positions, any of them at all. It was just EPA licenses as needed. So I've added requirements, getting gradually greater as you move up the chain. All of these changes have gone through the PBR board already, with including the description of the operator 2 position, so that if we go through all the process and it's acceptable to everybody, we're ready to negotiate it when the contract comes around, because it would be a union position. The 2 superintendents, systems and plant superintendents, they have a water 1 and a wastewater 3 license requirement. It's written to either have one or be in the process of obtaining one. That puts them at a level where they can become the operator of record for all 3 of our plants. The operator 2 position that I'm proposing would be a water 1 and a wastewater 2. That puts them in a position to be the backup operator of record, should we need one. Should an extended period of time, one of the superintendents has to leave, or they move on to another job, it gives us 30 days off the bat, and you can ask for an extension to cover operations at the plant if we need it. So the operator 1 position, I added in a water 1 and a wastewater 1 to have a basic license claim going there. So my thought process is, you can kind of see the flow chart going through. The field technician 1 is definitely an entry-level job with no requirements coming in. And you could get a license and move up to the field technician 2 position. I should also say, on top of these licenses is a 5-year requirement working with the city and a recommendation from the superintendent, so that it's not an automatic thing. You don't just go take a test and get promoted. But you can go up to the field tech 2 position. Should the operator position open up, you can slide over into the operator chain and then move your way up to an operator 2, and then eventually move up to the superintendent position. So I thought it gave you a motivation to get more licenses, which would help the city as far as coverage is concerned. It gave you a little bit of a alley to grow inside the organization. It would not be an additional person. You don't need to have an operator 1 or an operator 2. So we have 2 operators. They could be either level. You don't have to fill the operator 1 spot if someone was to move up to an operator 2. We would just have 2 operator 2s instead.
Just an opportunity for advancement.
Yes,
And also
yes.
placing more criteria on them.
On that person, right.
And it's not an automatic.
Correct.
Questions?
Yeah, I do. Do we have anybody currently at the wastewater 2 certification? Do we have anybody in-house that's already meets the 1 and the 2?
We do. Rich Obar, it has a 3 and a 3, and he is an outstanding operator out there. I have very little doubt that if this was to be accepted and put into place, that Rich would quickly be nominated to the operator 2 position. And
So what it would be then is a promotion for presumably him,
right.
and then, your field tech could move up. So we'd be bringing in a base level person.
That would be the ideally, but that would only be if so we have 2 operators now. The one does not have the licenses to move up, so he would stay in operator 1. The other one, more than likely, would get recommended to go up to an operator 2. As long as they don't leave, that's all we need. We don't have to move anybody else in. But if somebody in the operator chain was to leave, retire, or move to a different industry or city, we could promote from within, moving up the chain, and bring in a field technician 1 to start over again.
So we're not creating a position.
No, we're just
Gotcha.
creating a pay bracket
Sure.
possibility for an existing position.
Makes sense.
Mr. Walton?
So the operator 2, what pay bracket, so you say pay bracket, what increase in pay is that?
So the increase from a field tech 1 to a field tech 2 is 7% in the existing pay scale. So we kind of just figured we would mirror that. From an operator 1 to an operator 2 would be a 7% increase.
And my last you got any more?
No,
Oh, that's it.
My last question would be, the actual implementation of this would coincide with the budget?
Yes, yes,
So,
absolutely.
so you're just letting us know ahead of time here?
Correct,
You're not, okay,
correct.
and
Just
that's
to
good, I appreciate
try
that.
and get as much advance notice out as I can.
Excellent.
Okay. Moving on, the last item on the agenda is the Scenic View Estates sanitary sewer system. We have representatives here to answer any questions. I put together a packet, it's the one bound together. The paper clipped items are what the representatives for the development asked to be presented to the utility committee. Behind that is an example of the in-house grinder pump system. And then behind that are the emails that I've had back and forth with the EPA, the highlighted items being where they've answered my questions about the requirements for the city to have to assume responsibility for the system down the road. So to give a quick background.
Mr. Schrock?
Yes.
Very quick, I want to take care of a housekeeping item. Usually, nobody but the elected officials and the administration can speak at a committee meeting. I would like to entertain a motion just from anybody that, members of the, I don't know if there's an individual or you want to go with the members that are here regarding the development should be allowed to speak if needed.
yeah, I'll make a motion that any member of the Scenic View Estates.
My only comment is I am limited on time, so if we can limit the
Sure.
discussion to a 10-minute discussion, that would be my preference. Obviously, I don't know how many questions everybody has, but
I don't have I'm more to listen and then
Okay.
I don't
so
have
I will
any
second that
pre-planned.
motion.
So that's been moved and seconded. Kathy, could I have a roll on that?
Hicken,
Yes?
Walther,
Yep.
Lee,
Yes.
Okay. Housekeeping stuff out of the way. Welcome, gentlemen.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
So real quick background, I think we've been in communication with this quite a bit. The developer is proposing a force main system with grinder pumps from the units going into a collective force main, going back and forth on how the system would be laid out to eliminate the city from being responsible in the future should the HOA or the homeowners not be able to keep up with their portion of the system, any part that was deemed private. The only layout that the EPA said would not put the city at risk for taking ownership of this is by putting the grinder pumps in the basements of the house, where they would consider it a plumbing fixture. And that is the system that I've included the diagram of in your packet there. It's a 90-gallon wet well that would be put into the basement. It's in a sealed enclosure, and then it has a vent that goes up through the roof. That is the only system that the EPA has said they would not, down the road, consider making the city take over, basically. That's basically where we are. We've been in communication a lot. I don't want to take up all of our time rehashing stuff we've already talked about.
Mr.
Just
Wall?
a quick question for you, Chris. On that system, so what I think of is a typical septic aeration system. And it sounds like that's a typical system that could be, if this force main system wasn't, or failed in some type, in the future, then a wet well in a basement that exits the house could be utilized, a septic or an aeration system could utilize that system, correct? Could it be transferred to a septic or aeration system?
I do not see why it could not. You would just cut off the lateral and run it to whatever septic system you would put in.
Right, thanks.
Tommy?
I guess this is for any of you. Is this something, and I know we've communicated a lot, so I don't want to rehash it. Thank you for that. You've been very good about keeping us up to speed. This is something that you guys are good with?
Yes.
Using this type of system?
Absolutely.
As I'm gonna jump in here, as we've gone back and forth, Chris has indeed kept us pretty up to date on this stuff. I know, personally, my initial thoughts on this were, pretty gun shy about, a system that's being put in that at some later date, the city might have to take over. Obviously, the conversations that were initiated between you guys at Southwest Licking Sewer and Water didn't pan out. For me, I'm always interested in looking for different solutions, but that comes from me with a caveat, and that caveat is the two caveats. The first one is a historical precedence. So if somebody else in the city decides that they don't want or claim that they can't hook up to our facilities, can they then use this as a historical precedence to wedge or force the city to do it? And that's number one. Number two is, having been employed by the EPA for a long time, politically, they seem to blow, as I think you guys would admit, with the wind. And right now, somebody that's sitting there is saying, well, we're not gonna make the city be on the hook for this. As soon as there's an administration change or a problem pops up, they'll just change their tune, and we will be on the hook for it. And that's a concern. I don't know that those concerns can't be gotten around, but that's my initial blush. Some of my concerns. Tommy?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I was thinking about this, and this is probably a question for Brian, and you may even know with your legal background, but, you know, as you know, I'm getting phone calls all the time, like we all are on council, about water issues around the city. You know, the city can only do repairs in the right of way. We can't go onto private property and fix broken tile. So I'm wondering if, because this grinder pump is not in the right of way or on city property, and it's on private property, I would think that would protect us the same way that it would when we're out working on water issues. I mean, I get it that you work there, and I rely heavily on what you think, but I can't imagine them making us go into a home and fix a grinder pump. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think my concerns don't have to do with an individual problem. I think this would solve an individual problem. The problem for me is forethinking, think of it like the Oaks. Is what I look at, is down the road, first of all, you don't know if an HOA, and this is another concern, if the HOA is gonna dissolve or spend all their money on, I don't know, horse sculptures, and so they have no means to you know, pay for fixes. And you begin to get to a situation where multiple systems have failed, and those owners are either via a workaround or via negligence are just sending it out the side of a hill. The EPA is not going to care about making us deal with it. They're just gonna say that needs to be fixed, and you guys have a sewer system there. So you guys get to fix it. And that's kind of what did happen, slightly.
I get that, but I know you're.
I think it's even worse than that.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but
you go. No, I wanna hear your
It's,
input.
if this were to fail and not be fixed, then a new system has to be installed. A
Right.
different system that would operate, and that's why I asked about the septic, or the leach field type operation. I'd like to have at least the fallback position of each one of these 5-acre lots or 2-acre, you know, they're all pre-approved for septic and or aeration, so that if the force main system were to be abandoned or somehow not operational, we're not going back in and doing what we had to do in the Oaks, which is assess everybody and put in 40 and 50-foot deep gravity sewers. Obviously, they don't wanna do that, we don't wanna do that, so that's my issue here is, I don't want a system to fail irregardless of what's in the house. I understand that is, per the ORC, not our problem, but it's the system itself that's outside of the house, per your comment, that we would then have to go fix in the right of way, per se. So that's really where I get, I can't think of a lot of reasons why a force main system would fail. I mean, really, it's pretty simple. It's even a shallow piping system into a gravity system. So I can't think of a lot of reasons why it would fail, but if it were to fail, I don't wanna be responsible for putting in a gravity system and going back and assessing a bunch of angry residents. That's my feelings on it.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, this might not be a bad time, we're kinda up here talking, you guys volunteered to come in and talk, so please, If you wanna step up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and, maybe you have answers or comments, or welcome.
Wonderful. Hi guys, my name is Dmitry Filarenko. I'm a landowner, and I live at 4444 Ravine Drive in Westerville. And we've been working a lot on this project and did a lot of research, so pretty much can answer all questions. We went to situation if system fail from different directions. It's no known precedents when appliances failed and EPA would make you go inside and fix it, because it's so many regulations limited you from getting to the property without permits. So this bridge probably will never cross, because it will create so many futures issues, so nobody wants it to happen. And system by itself, I want to point it to you, it's not expensive system. It's from 4,800 up to 5,200, depends on the place when it's installed. Pump by itself around $2,000, and houses which we will be expecting there, their minimum will start with $500,000. So it's a fracture of cost. So people who got $500,000 house, if pump failed, it's really low chance they was like, okay, I don't want to live in this house, I want to abandon it, I want somebody else to fix it for me inside of my house. So it will just, what's failed is just the pump. And pump is just like replaceable, I mean, not user end, but pretty simple to replace. And system comes with 5 years warranty. It's also got Wi-Fi notificator. If it's any failure in operation, it will notify user and can also notify city if necessary, if you have it in the future connected. So, and it could be fixed. And the homeowner association, what we discussed in the past, they will have a maintenance contract offering to city and keep 1 or 2 pump, because they're gonna be identical. So they can step ahead, and we expect the houses up to $1.5 million. So this community actually gonna be very, let's say, profitable for city, because we also homeowner association will clean streets and will be responsible for it. So force line, you know, it's 10 times cheaper than gravity, and we avoid very deep manholes. So chances, from what we researched on, I think chances you guys will need to take it over a pump inside the house, 0. So.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I want to say that, you know, from the first meeting over at Aetna, I really like this development, and you guys have been very, very good to work with from everything I'm told. And me speaking for me, because there's 7 of us. I hope that the city can do everything we can to get you guys moving out there, because I think that is a phenomenal development that's great for the city, great for you guys. I hope it works out and you come back and want to do another one somewhere else. I get your point that does ease my concerns that these are $500,000 homes. It's not I'm sure, don't want to offend anybody, but it's not a whatever. We'll leave it at that. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. But so it does ease that for me. Nobody's going to want to, let that go or just walk away from it. With all that being said, as much as I want this to happen, I want to make sure that the city is not in a bad spot. And I guess I'm going to have to rely heavily on, I believe everything you're saying, but these 3 guys here are a lot more experienced in utilities than I am. I feel good about it, but I might not be thinking about everything. With Andy's background, Tim's and Chris's, my concerns have been eased a lot, but I still reserve that little bit for these guys to tell me, Tommy, you're not thinking about something, think about this, because it's just not I'm not a professional in this. So I wanna see it happen, I wanna support this, I feel good about it, but I still need to rely on these three guys to make sure that I'm not missing something, so.
If you don't mind, I add something to it. What I want, appreciate good comments. That's very nice. And according to John from High IPA, he said basically you can make a regulation in building code and permit for this construction. So it's going to be only this option. It's going to be appliance, consider as appliances. One thing. Good idea to see it in the future for like switching to septic system, but I don't know, it doesn't matter how expensive home is, repair pump would be $2,000, newer septic would be over 20. So
Yeah.
it's an option, you know, if you want to go with this option, but hard to imagine
Well,
somebody
I-
choose
I'll
20.
I believe you. I believe that it's cheaper, and that's probably why it is. So it's one of the reasons why you're moving that direction.
small
Because it is
fraction.
cheaper than putting in a deep gravity for some of the, you know, the other thing that I recently, and I'm still coming to grips with this as well. The other question that I have, and it's not the only other question, but it's one of them is, I understand it, if you think of this as three phases or three pieces, as you build out this, one of those three pieces is extremely close to the Hazelwood gravity system. And that would be the southernmost piece of this. And I was always under the impression that would access our sewer system via gravity on the bottom side.
Mhm.
And we were then searching for solutions for the top two. And I think, is it 60 homes roughly?
60.
And I don't know if it's 20, 20, and 20, but for ease, I thought the bottom 20 were taken care of, and that we're looking for solutions for the other two, 20 and 20, now they're 40. I wanted to ask you guys, is that still the case, or are you talking about the lower 20 also being on this system?
We're talking about everything doing
Everything.
the same because homeowner association will be involved in it, and we want to give, you know, equal rights to everybody. So people would not say why I pay for somebody else.
I understand. And-
Tim, real quickly, because I
I
do
know
have
you
to
gotta go.
apologize, I have to go, but I've got 3 questions. One, Chris, as far as inspections go for Licking County, in this situation, have you explored anything with Licking County to see if they have any issues? And let me just step back for a second. I have a grinder pump in my house. I have a lift, and it's not a big deal. I agree with you, it's simple. I've replaced the pump myself. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that or not, but I did. So, I'm not worried about it. You know, you do have to pay some attention to some ventilation and so forth, but other than that, it's pretty simple. So let me go back to, I'm assuming Licking County is very comfortable with these, type of private grinder pump lift stations.
Right, I have not reached out to them, but I believe so. There are other communities that have them. I don't know about the inside the house community, but my understanding is it's treated just like a plumbing stack. So as long as
I've
you've
got it
been
inside my house, so
Okay.
it's not, I
So
would
it's okay.
assume that they can be, they can do
Right.
it. Second, other infrastructure that's outside of the house, such as air release valves, if there's any lift that we are gonna be responsible for, or any kind of augmentation to a, you know, these systems are a little bit different than traditional gravity. You've got valves, you've got check valves, you've got backflow preventers, you've got all kinds of things that are involved in this as you climb up hills and as you go down hills. Are we comfortable with doing all that? Do we have the expertise to maintain those types of structures?
So we have, there's no doubt that this is a completely new system for the city. We do not have private grinder pumps in our collection system. We do have force mains coming off of our 7 community lift stations, and it's very similar concept to the whole thing. So yes, we would be able to maintain it. It would be, the only concern is that it's more effort than gravity, obviously, but
Right.
we would be able to handle that.
And then lastly, as far as any additional upgrades that have to be done to our system outside of this, whether it's in a lift or it's beyond the lift stations, Is there anything that this project is going to cause the city to upgrade?
No, the only thing that we would require from this would be a epoxy coating on inside the manhole that the force main dumps into and to downstream for the hydrogen sulfide release. But the flow is small enough that it would not affect our existing system.
Okay. I saw some zoning discussions about putting this on to, development plans, our different things for requirements. Have you talked with Mr. Zetz about any of the legalities of requiring, but this is belts and suspenders. We've got an OPA, we got an Ohio EPA idea from Mr. Owen, we've talked about him earlier.
Mhm.
So trust is not our biggest attribute at this point with the Ohio EPA. So with that, belts and suspenders as far as requiring the subdivision, requiring the final users to understand that, they need to be given notice via either deed restrictions or development agreements or some method that this is theirs and we are not obligated to touch it, even if the Ohio EPA says we are.
Right, that's something I've been in communication with Scott about, and he understands that and how it would work, and he was talking about if we came to that point, that he would draft language with Mr. Zetz to make sure that it was in the zoning language. Just letting you know, this is yours, this is not the city's, you have to be responsible for this.
And then lastly, the idea that potentially septic could be utilized on these types of lots. I'm still of the idea that pre-approval would be something that is, again, something you can put into the file and say, we have pre-approval for septics on this if this system were to have a system-wide failure of some type, that we decided we didn't want that and require them to go to septic. So those are my I will tell you that I'm with Tommy on this. I think that it's a great subdivision idea. I would look for it to be very successful and to be repeated over and over again, quite frankly. So this is a hurdle that is in your way right now. I understand why you're doing it, and I understand the financial pros and cons of it very well. Just understand from our point of view that there's financial pros and cons also. While you mentioned that the houses are an attribute beneficial to us from a tax income, the risk is also out there that we have to totally evaluate and make sure we're comfortable with before we make a recommendation.
And we want to work with you to make
Okay,
sure
so-
your concerns are addressed. We want to be on the same team.
In the end, I agree with both of them on that
Thank you.
issue. So,
Thank
I'd just like to point out,
Andy, if you need to leave, you can get up.
I do.
can I ask one thing? I want to make a comment and then ask a question before you leave. Just because I've sat through some other things that weren't, when you guys were here, like at Etna and stuff like that, when you guys presented to Beechwood. I want to point out too, I realize that this is much cheaper and you're in this to make money and we want you to make money. But I also do think that it's worth pointing out that part of the reason, which I appreciate, and I'm sure the homeowners will too, part of the reason for the not going with the force main is they're trying to protect the
Tradition, correct. Without going.
gravity, I'm sorry. If they're trying to keep wooded lots.
Exactly.
And I know that's part of, I realize cost is a big one, but that's also something too. I think that if they ended up having to do that, it wouldn't be as good a quality of lot. Not just for the residents, but for the city. I think we want to preserve that. So that's my comment. My question is where do we go from here? I guess I feel like we owe them something as far as, I don't know that we're ready to make any type of recommendation. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but I know it's on the table.
Right.
If we're not ready to make a recommendation, at least what do they need to do for us to get there to be able to bring them off the table and vote on it?
I would think at this point that we would have to get the requirement language agreed to before we should pull off the table, would be my assumption. Pre-approved for septic and
And that'd be through the county, right?
Correct, well,
The approval.
soil and water.
Soil and
Right.
water.
right, and then also the language in the zoning documents stating this is your pump.
Deed
this is not
restriction, you can
city's.
do it a number of different ways,
Right.
Zach will be able to tell us.
But I would assume we would want to get that squared away before we would pull off the table, because when it comes off the table, it's up for its third reading.
Yep.
So would that be if once Scott gets that part done, then we have to vote on that at council, is that a 3 reading?
I do not know, how the zoning goes through.
Yes.
One thing else I would add to that, and I'm gonna echo Tommy's concern. You know, if we're going, and I totally agree that these are valuable lots, wooded lots, but I think we should then require them to have some type of coverage, some type of wooded coverage. Because quite frankly, I've been in developments before, and I've been involved with developments that say they're gonna keep wooded lots, and they clear cut.
We do have language. It's,
Okay, that's fine.
20 feet around house, no cutted wood.
Perfect. That, just making sure we're
It's
all on the
already
same
there,
page,
yeah.
that, so as we stand up and say, we are for wooded lots, that they don't end up being all the wood then logged out and done.
We see value of these lots in
Great.
woods, and it's why more the money, because it's worth money. And if we would do gravity, it would be 100-foot cut off, because it will go to 46 foot deep. So we don't want it to happen, and we see value in it. It's why we already put a limitation. They can't cut wood more than 20 feet beyond the house.
Perfect.
So
Great. So I need to excuse myself. Thank you guys for coming in. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We still have a quorum with Andy gone, so I'm gonna, you know, there are a couple of things that I, the first thing is, I respect your homeowners association, making it everybody unique. I would probably have passed on to Chris, if you've got 1/3 of this that is not far at all from the ideal system, I would still, and this is just me, keep in mind I'm on a 7, I would at least want to explore the difference financially and have you guys explain, if the bottom third is this close to being a deep gravity feed. You know, I understand the other 40 homeowners are gonna say, why do we have to pay into this, and they don't. And the answer is because those 20 were lucky enough to be right beside the sewer collection system for the city, and we have no concerns at all about those. And in following up on Tommy's statement, you know, I think we hammer through, Chris continues to work with you guys. He'll probably constantly talk to us, and he'll probably bring those concerns to you. I know we speak quite regularly, and I have significant faith in what he says. As it moves on, then it would go before council for the rezoning. I think that would be 3 readings, for Stroud stuff. I could be wrong.
Reason, why would it be?
Or, I mean, for the changes in the language.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, I know we're skeptical about waiving those readings, but if it's something simple, I mean, we can, if it's not I don't know, how do you feel about that, Tim? I'm kinda just talking.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah,
I mean, it depends on it, you know, I think this project has gone through many iterations, and I don't know, it would have to be pretty significant for me to waive a reading, but it doesn't mean I would never vote to do it. What I wanna impress on the developers is also, you know, you're here before the utility committee, all 3 of us, in fact, Tommy sells himself short. We all understand, obviously have a little bit more focus on utilities, because we sit on this committee, some of us have experience, some are learning. But then the other 4 members of council will also have to be convinced that this is a good idea. And the way that this is working exactly the way government, God help me, should, is a pre-screening committee is asking questions, and once they're kind of convinced, it goes before the whole body, and Chris and BJ and any one of the 3 of us would also say, yeah, you know, we asked a lot of questions about this, and we think that we feel comfortable with it. We've put enough safeguards in to protect the city. At the same time, it's not priced to a point where we lose a good development. That's the needle we're threading. We know that. You know that too, of course. If it was up to me, I personally like the concept of gravity. I understand this piece of property, and this situation does require some creative thinking. I'm not against that, but what I don't wanna do is, I don't want me to be enamored with getting a very great development in here, and down the road, have people in my position pay the price for it, because they have to turn around and, you know, and that's what we're trying to do here. That's what, so.
I see that.
I want you guys to know that as well. I want that to be upfront. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think just for a little historical perspective, Tim's correct, and I wasn't here for this, but he was. But I mean, we've had a development that was very nice homes. They were older, but probably back in the day, you know, relatively speaking, priced about the same, where we had to go in and assess them. And it wasn't pretty for the city, and I think, you know, that creates a little bit of hesitation, because going through that, again, you were here, I wasn't, that was a tough one. And, that we were forced to have to hook them up, and they've paid significant assessment fees, and we're all just, you know, it was a learning experience. But, I just want you guys, when you leave, and us too, all of us to understand what the path forward is. Chris has laid it out there. And I just, you know, I know you guys wanna get going. Just please be patient with us. We want you here. It just, we'll do our best, and, you know, I feel good about it. I might feel a little bit better about it than these guys do. But I also 100% agree. I can't put the city in a bad spot. And I'm sure you guys.
And I can answer this concern because what it happens when it's one developer trying to buy more than he can swallow.
Yeah.
It's really possible what's happened. What we do here, we will develop lots and the different builders will build. So it's not like you guys depends of my financial or our company financial situation or change of directions. It will be different builders coming, meet their requires for building, you know,
Yeah.
style, septic system, everything. And so these lots are not financially tight. They paid off and they just sell as it goes. So
Right.
development not supposed to fail, like for example, one of builders, Olympus or
Yeah.
Alta or Dominion, they change their direction and they're like, okay, we don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
So what's pretty much happened with when it was designed for 240 homes, it's too expensive, they dropped the ball. Here, lots of development system will be putting in before lots sold. So, you know, system will be there and it will be running by one pump. So, you know, it's kind of illuminates this, I mean, not kind of, 100% illuminates this risk. Anything can happen, so they will be sold later. But they still wooded and pretty.
The question I have for Chris is, as a force main operates, you've got a pump at the head, right, that's driving, so you've got all these little grinder pumps, they're sending the waste into laterals into the main.
Right.
And the force main is driven by a pump to our system in some way.
So this system, each individual pump can be that pump. So each pump will lift what's in their wet well, send it to the force main, send it all the way to the end of the force main and dump into our gravity. So the more pumps that are on at the same time, the faster it moves through, but you only need one. So whichever pump is the highest, it turns on at that time, it clears the entire force main for the hotel.
Is there an individual pump for the main itself?
So that was something that they have offered, that we could put a pump station at the very head, that would be the cities that if we needed to flush the main out and nobody's pump was working, we could use that head pump to pump clean water through the force main, to flush it out, if everybody else has failed.
You will have a level of control in this case, you know,
Sure.
it's not like you have to go to somebody's home and say, we need you to
Right, so
pump
we
it.
would have our own station that ideally would only get turned on to exercise for maintenance, and we wouldn't need it, but we would have a way to force water through the force main.
Up to 2 miles it can push.
And that, of course, that would become the property of the city.
Yeah, the head pumps, yes, that pump, and a generator go
And
with it.
generator, yes.
Yes.
Can
for
I,
these cities.
Can I expect that you will also look at the life expectancy of that pump and?
Yes, I have, it's an 8 to 10 year life expectancy, according to the manufacturer. That obviously is being household use, this would be a clean water pump, turned on once a month for maintenance.
So we expect them possibly.
I would expect it to last a little longer than 8 to 10 years, but
Where I'm
that's,
getting at with that is the concept of, now we're putting this stuff in and we're giving it to the city, and then in 10 years, the city goes, well, now we've got to replace
Right.
X number of pumps, and that's a concern, but not
Correct.
always a concern. That certainly happens with infrastructure in the ground, right? I mean, you guys put sewers in, those are given to the city. If they break down, they break down. And that, hence the concept of I mean, that's obviously what tap fees are designed for and blah, blah, blah. So I just wanted to ask that question.
Yep.
Anything else?
No?
I appreciate you gentlemen coming in. Tommy?
No, just be patient with us, we'll hopefully get this rolling.
We are, thank you very much for working together, and it was legit concerns, and we're glad we found a solution, and let's move forward and make it happen.
So
The quicker is better.
I'll meet with Scott today and explain where we're at with the pre-approved septic and the language explaining that this is a homeowner pump, and we'll move forward as fast as we can.
That, I would also say, I mean, I didn't really get an answer, but the question was just thrown like a softball into the air. I don't know that you can give me one, but I do still have a question about
The lower third.
the lower third. Maybe the answer is, look, we just don't wanna do that. Okay, but I'll take that into consideration when I vote. Everybody be different.
So we would want a engineered drawing showing the lower third being gravity so that we could review that before all this goes through.
I just think I would like them and you to enter into a dialogue back and forth about, you know, are you this close? If the main reason for on the developer side is, we want all 60 people to kind of be equal in their sharing, but from the city side, if it really is that close and it's by far the best, my concerns aren't as much with the 40 residents that might be upset that they're not equal.
Right.
When we know those 20 are feeding into the system exactly the way it was supposed to be designed, and you know, so I wanna realize the savings, but it's just a question that I have.
Absolutely, absolutely, we can definitely do that, we've got
And I
a
think you
pretty
guys
good
can-
relationship, we can definitely
Absolutely,
do
yeah,
that.
and we're supposed to have answer on wetlands, because with all these tons of rains we got,
Mhm.
so it was our big concern to make sure we just left it alone because we wanna go this direction and see if we
Right.
can get it, but we will come back and review this
Absolutely.
information we got, because it's, wetlands
And that's a
did
perfect-
grow.
Sure, and that's a perfectly valid answer in response to it. If you know, I'm not, I haven't really gotten knee deep into the distances and how far, and the elevations between the different sections of the development and where the gravity, where the receptacle for our deep gravity would be.
Mhm.
So, you know, there could be an absolute proper answer is, well, we'd have to traverse wetlands and,
Mhm.
fine, I understand that, I understand wetlands as much as the next guy, so.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that, absolutely.
Okay,
We
absolutely.
can do
Sure.
that.
Thank you very much.
Nothing else before the committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
You'll.
You need me to make it, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. Kathy?
Hicken?
Yes?
Lee?
Yes.
Adjourn.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in, Tommy, thank you, gentlemen.